All right, my StashCan 2.0. It's a fake soda can with a sequential puzzle lid and a combination lock bottom. And I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty happy with myself when I designed the original safe can, call it StashCan 1.0. It just had the sequential puzzle top on it and wasn't very challenging, so it was, you know, novel for sure, and I really liked it and I was pretty happy with myself. Anybody who saw my video knows. But now I'm really happy with myself. This is a programmable combination lock, 100% 3D printed programmable combination lock that you must enter the correct code in there first before you can then execute the puzzle sequence on the lid. So just for this introduction, I've entered the code in on the bottom already, and now I can undo the lid, and I did that on purpose so I could show you the bits. There's basically three components: the sequential puzzle lid, and I think I'll make one that's just a plain lid so you don't have to have that. And then on the bottom is the entire lock assembly, and in the middle of the can is a liner that whatever you're putting in the can would sit inside, and that's there to protect the latch. The latch is free floating up inside the can, so it's gravity based, which is a really awesome way to make this non-hackable, if you will, because the latch, which you can't really see here, but you can see how it just slides up and down. When it's up, it's interfering with the threads to the top. So when it's up, you can't open the top, and when it's down, obviously it slides out of the way and you can. But in order for it to go down, the lock tumblers, which are through this hole here, they all have to align, and so that the lock latch can slide down into that, and that's what makes it possible to open. When the lock's not unlocked, when all the tumblers are randomized, that can't slide down, and so you can't open the lid. And I like the way it is. I've intentionally done it the way it is, because I like the way it is, which is it's gravity based. So in order to enter the code, you typically flip the can over so you can see the combination lock. You would dial in your code, and then before you know whether it works, you have to flip it back over. In theory, you could try and do it by holding it upright, but on each of the tumblers is a ridge, so you can't test the tumblers because it'll lock in any position. So you have to operate it upside down, enter the code, then flip it over, and then try and decipher the lid and see if you're in. And when it's operating properly, you'll always hear the lock latch inside there. It slides back and forth. So that's a quick overview. I'm going to show you all the bits and pieces that that are required to make it up. It's 100% 3D printed, no support required. There's two pieces that have support designed into them, and the rest you just print and assemble. I've done it all out of PETG, which I like, so I can only speak for PETG, but it's working really, really well. It's probably worth noting that on the surface, the lid to the StashCan 1.0 versus StashCan 2.0 look identical, and the housing looks similar. Of course, this one's got a bottom, but even the threads at the top are different. There's not much you can carry forward. A few of the internal parts of this you could carry forward, but it's not worth it because they're really quick prints. They're tiny parts. So the old StashCan lid will not work with the new StashCan 2.0 for several reasons, but not the least of which is that I've reversed the way it operates. I've changed the threads to make it more secure, and I've made it so that it's a reverse thread on top. And so when on the old one, this is the original, you press in the tab and then rotate this way. On the new one, you press in the tab and rotate this way. And I like that because natural thing to do is try and open the can. Oh, I can't open the can because I've reversed the threads on the lid. It's not much of a barrier, but it could be another small barrier to somebody accidentally opening this. Or even if they have the combination lock, it'll delay them to open it. And so now it comes out this way. And so it looks identical, but it's almost a mirror image. And the other thing that's different is on the original StashCan, there was lots of indexing holes on the inside lip. This one, because of the lock latch running up and down, it has to stop in the exact same spot every time. And so there's only one indexing point for this. So this just locks down, and then the latch can go back and forth. So that's super important to know, that you can't just take the lid from your old StashCan and stick it on here. You need to reprint all the parts. I'm gonna show you now how to put it together. I've posted quite a bit of instructions on my blog at logicalplanet.com, but I said on there I'm going to rely heavily on this video, but the truth is you probably need both. It's a pretty complicated design. I definitely would rate it as advanced. So if you're not, you know, if you're not printing at your best, don't try this project. And but if you're printing well and you're ambitious, give it a go. It's awesome once it's put together, and I think it's going to really lead to some other designs for me that I can already envision, which I'm pretty enthusiastic about exploring. So yeah, let me show you how it all goes together. All right, so as mentioned, there's a lot of parts here, and it's probably best if you read the blog and then watch the video and then use the blog to rebuild it, unless you sit and pause the video. But there's really three groups of parts. There's the main body, which is only 4 parts, very straightforward. The actual can itself, the liner, which I've mentioned already, the lock latch, which floats up and down on the inside here, inside the can, and also a thread lock. So this little part sits inside the can, and it's what you push down to lock the lock assembly into the can, so you can never unscrew the lock assembly without accessing the top of the can first. So that's pretty straightforward, and I'll show you how that goes together. The lock assembly, which is going to take a bit of discussion, and then the top I'll leave to last, because if you've built the original version, this is identical to build, it's just a reversed version of it, so you may not need to watch that again. So we'll start with the lock. The lock is built around this lock case, I'm calling it. Might have been better to call it a housing, but lock case. And it has one unique part on it, which is this little tab, and that's your index for the lock dial. So when you turn the dial, that's your reference point there, the little triangle to where you set your combination. All the parts fit inside here except for this dial. It starts on the outside, so you can just drop it down onto the drop those together like that. These springs, there's 3 of them. It's the same part, just print it 3 times. They have a slight recess on each side, which is very difficult to see on here because it's 1 layer height, but when you hold it in your own hand, you'll see it very easily. So it's printed with that up, so there's no bridge required, but you put it in the other way. So flip it over and slide it onto the edges here, and it's got a little bit of a barb action on the housing, so once it goes on, it should stay on both sides, and just slide it. So once you've got it on, slide it down and repeat that, making sure each time that the recess is on the lower side. These springs serve 2 functions. One is that they slow the rotation of the tumblers. If the tumblers were free spinning, it'd be super problematic. And they also have an index, basically a detent on the tumblers. So each of the tumblers have these notches, and that aligns with this little protrusion on the springs. So that's your housing and the dial. And the rest is pretty easy. There's 3 discs that represent the tumblers of the lock. 2 of them are printed with the numbers on the bottom side. Those are your A and B, and the 3rd one is printed with the numbers on the top. That's your C, which is your 3rd digit. So on the lock dial, there's a higher nub here than here. This is your number, this is your index for the lock combination. And on these key discs, the same thing. There's one here, it's a key disc. And this key disc it has a little bit of print support on it, which can be a little bit of trouble getting off because it's such a fine part, but can slide in under the print layer or the part layer, a thin blade, and just kind of give it a little flick like so, and work around it until it comes loose. Just be very careful if you're using a knife like I am, not to cut off this nub. I've done that a couple of times, but I've made it stronger, so hopefully it's okay. And you'll see when you put these together, and each one can only fit one disc, so they go together fairly naturally. This is the original one, and I'll just try and set this to lock combination 1, 2, 3. So I take the number 1, which is written there, probably difficult to see in the camera, and align it with the tall nub. So that's now pointed through. So that's now set this combination to 1. Obviously, you could put that to any number you want, and that's how you set the lock combination. On the second one, you want to just take the disc and again rotate it into place until the longest nub sticks out. So I've got it on 2 here, right there, that's 2. And you can't see it yet because I haven't set it in. Once you've got it close, then squish this on and it'll click into place. So now if the angle is right, you might be able to see that I've got the number 2 there and the nub sticking out, and then that can just drop in anywhere. You just drop it in. And on the last disc, same thing, look for the number you want. In this case I want 3, so I press that on where it's aligned to number 3, and then squish that until you hear it click. Again, the nub, raised nub is there. Drop it in. And that's your lock tumbler set. It's probably worth looking at right now, what I mentioned earlier in the video. For this lock to work, you need all of these tumblers to line up. If you can see down to the bottom there, it's unlocked. If you can't see down to the bottom, then this is locked, or theoretically in the locked state. And then there's a retainer that sits up on top. It is the component that holds this together and protects anything from coming down into the lock and disrupting your lock operation. So that snaps in like that. There's a raised piece here to help it index onto this, and it can only fit one way around. So you might struggle with it, but it only goes on one way. And then the C-clip, it just goes onto the spindle here and locks that into place. So that lock's now built and operational. To demonstrate it, I can show you. Now, I should point out, I've made these slots in it here because in order to fit under the standard can space, there's not a lot of room. You can turn it with your fingers if you're desperate, and your fingers aren't too big like mine, but it's not very easy. So the better way is just take something thin and narrow, turn it. So I need to go 1, go back past 2, and then to 2 again, 2, and then directly to 3. And then you'll see, oh, you didn't see. Okay, so one of the things I really have to emphasize, and I emphasized on the website, on my blog, is that once you put your lock together, always, always, always test it before you put it in the can and close the can. The reason being that once it's in, if you don't have your lock combination, there is no way to undo this without sitting there and dialing in all 1,000 possible combinations, or cutting the can in half, and I've had to do that twice. So, and I'm saying that because I just realized I screwed up here, and I set my lock combination as 1, 2, 3, but in fact I did it in reverse order. I did the bottom disc as 1 and then 2, and the top disc as 3, and that's the opposite of how it works. So the code is actually 3, 2, 1. So if I spin the dial clockwise 2 times or more, and then go to 3, then go past 0, and then to 2, and then back to immediately to 1, you can see down inside here now all the tumblers are aligned, so that means the lock latch could drop down, and that would release the top so that it could open. And if you see me just turning it inside there now, you can see them start to close up and randomize as you just go through it. So once they're randomized, the lock latch can't drop down to the very bottom. Even if the top 2 ones are there, the third one will not drop enough to let the top threads open. so that's your lock assembly, and once it's made, you're good. You only need to change it if you want to change, or open it if you want to change your code. And the other thing is a very light film of lubricant on the, probably on most of the moving parts, but certainly on the outsides, on the outside edges of these. This is the outside edge of the tumblers rub against these springs, and you want to have really smooth operation, and that little bit of lubricant helps significantly with that. If you don't have lubrication, you might find that the tumblers jump a little bit as they stick to it. And I described earlier the fact that there's a little gap or a lower area, and the reason for that is that gap in between each of these springs here now allow these springs to operate independently, so that you get very consistent action of each of the tumblers independent of one another. And so that's built, that's good to go. Of course, now I don't know which number the bottom one's on. They're super important too, from a troubleshooting perspective. If you ever, when you're building it, if you lift the dial off, you have to open it again, because you don't know. I'll try and demonstrate what I'm trying to say. So that's now on the number 1. And if I drop in the 2 other discs, this is the B disc. Oh, and it moved already. And the A disc. And then I let this drop out, the dial drop out, and somehow accidentally rotate it, I could be on a different number now. And that can happen quite easily. So you have to, and I am, see I'm on 0 now. So you have to make sure that you hold that upright or put it on a flat surface. Once it's on a flat surface, it won't move. And so once you start building, it's best just leave it on a flat surface until you get all the parts together, like so. There we go. So lock assembly. The lock assembly can't go onto the can until you first insert the lock latch, and the lock latch comes in from the bottom, and it's got an indication on at the top. It's really difficult to see because of the way it prints, but the side that's got the writing on it, which even if it's blurry, you know that's the top. So it goes in first, and it just pushes in until it snaps into place. This benefits from a light layer of lubricant as well, because you don't want that to ever stick as it's doing right now. So we'll put a little bit of lubricant on that. And I'm going to do this hastily because I'm filming. So back in. Okay. And then the thread lock comes in from the top. So the thread lock is very similar, but on the opposite side of the wall. You just flex it until it goes in and it drops in, and it's got a little detent on it. It does not need lubrication because it's not going to move by itself. It won't hurt to lubricate it, but doesn't need it. And then the can liner with the opening goes in first until they straddle those 2 parts, and now that's sitting up in there, and you can see the lock latch can still move on the outside of the can, and you have access to the thread lock over here. So now with it upside down, I can screw on the lock system, lock assembly, okay? And once it's fully seated, press down the lock latch. That thread lock right there now prevents this from coming off, so you can't unscrew this. And that's the bulk of the can built. And I'll do the top now, but if you've seen this before, you might not need to watch it again. The top is printed with support in it, and you can just break that out. Then you need to put in the thumb plate. You can drop in the tab from the top at the same time. Each of these parts has an index on it right there. You can see that, and it goes against this index key over here. So that goes on next. The only kind of slightly complicated part is this spring plate. And it's only complicated because you have to flex it to get it in. So you can see one end drops in very easily. Make sure again you've got the index in the right place. And then there's a couple ways to do this, but one of the easiest ways is to just force the spring part down without setting the whole ring down, like that. Get it in the hole. And once you're in, you know, because you'll see the tab extending from both sides of this plate. And yeah, then you're in. And once it's in, then drop on the cam plate, which is what pulls them in later. And drop on the C-clip. It's probably easier to do the retainer first. Drop on the retainer so you don't have to worry about parts coming out. And then the C-clip while you're I'm still holding this top tab. Oh, and it's in the wrong position. That needs to be facing out straight when you start. There you go. And now that's built. So now this should not be able to turn unless this is depressed. So depress that, rotate that, and that pulls in these tabs so that this can become unlocked. Good time to point out that the lock latch here is up right now, and that's because this lock is in the locked state. This can only drop down when this is unlocked. So I need to unlock this again. So we're going to 3, past 0 to 2, and then first instance of 1. And now that can drop back down, and this can go on. Oh, and it's reverse thread, right? So that goes there. That's now locked on, and once I disturb the code, this is locked. And we're pretty solidly locked. Now let's see if it opens for me as well as it's supposed to. So, and then 3, past 0 to 2, 1. Now I can hear the latch can move, so that means it's dropped down. Turn this, and then counterclockwise, and we're in. Awesome, right? Counterclockwise. And that's it. And once you turn this again, turn it at all, you're locked again. All right, and as a couple of final notes, through the magic of television, or should I say magic of 3D printing, I've now made a cap for the StashCan 2 that is just a cap, so no sequential puzzle in it, and it'll just go in like the other one, and when you lock it, it's locked in. So to remove it, just enter your code and unscrew the lid. So you've got that as an option in amongst the STLs. All the STL files for the StashCan 2 are on thangs.com. Please like it if you like it, and let me know if you make it. It's super fun.